Where is your panel? Far away?
Upstairs.
Okay. Okay.
That's okay, I'll find it.
It's sharp 9 o'clock.
I'll be fashionably late.
How many sessions do you have this year?
Huh?
How many sessions do you have this year?
4 or 3, something like that.
Quiet.
All right. Well, I show 8 o'clock. So,
Okay.
we're on in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to OpenStack Summit 2015, the beautiful Vancouver, Canada. And we're live from Vancouver, from the Vancouver Convention Center, with a great panel here right next to me, to my left and to my right. I'm going to ask the folks to introduce themselves very quickly, and then we're going to get going. We have a great panel here and great content. And also we have great guests from overseas, from Japan, all the way, GMO Internet Group, who are one of the key customers of OpenStack and Nexenta and many of the vendors on the panel. And they're going to say also a few words about their implementation of OpenStack and how they are basically deploying their internet services around the world, from Japan to Singapore to US. Basically, they're going to be with us in a few minutes. So let me get started very quickly to get going. Quick intros, names, and organizations before we get started with GMO. Okay. Let's start with Heidi, with you.
Okay, I'm Heidi Bretz, and I'm Director of Business Development for the OpenStack Foundation.
Good morning. I'm Al Sadowski. I'm a Research Director for 451 Research.
Good morning. Francisco Paula, CEO of Solinea.
Ram from Wipro, run the high-tech vertical business for Wipro.
I'm Kiko Rees from Canonical. I do VP Hyperscale and Storage.
And I'm Boris Rensky from Mirantis. I'm a co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer at Mirantis.
And also goalie for Vancouver Canucks. I love those jerseys, Boris. I need to get one of those.
Thank you.
And everybody at the panel, I think we're going to get one. Thank you, Boris. Thank you, Heidi. So we're going to get started with Heidi in a second. But before we do that, let me introduce the GMO Internet Group. Our folks from Japan, just come on to the front for a second. Jun, Goka-san, and Saito-san. Let me have to do the invisible line. Hi, Saito-san. So Jun, maybe we get started with you very quickly. A quick intro to GMO and what you guys are doing with OpenStack. There are a lot of companies doing a lot of work with OpenStack, but you guys done amazing work in production, doing great things for the for your customer base. Let's get started with you.
Hi, I'm Jun. I want to introduce GMO. They are great users for the OpenStack and Nexenta in Japan, and they are the number one provider for the services for related to internet. I want to introduce them, but they have some the talks in Japanese, so some Japanese folks can understand what they're saying. So I want to pass to the mic to Saito-san.
Super, super.
皆様こんにちは。我々は GMO インターネットという、日本の会社です。インターネットに関連したビジネスを主に展開しています。例えば、クラウドサービス、ドメインレジストレーション、インターネットアクセスです。日本ではもう圧倒的なシェアを誇っています。でまた、全世界で8カ国で、すべて、各国に84の支社があります。
So I translate, and the GMO is the number one service provider for any related to internet things, and they provide many services like domain registrations and internet services and like hosting services. So they have like a really like large companies in Japan, and also have like 48 branches all over the world. They provide the services all over the world. Yeah.
我々は今回コノハというパブリッククラウドサービスをリリースしました。コノハは高機能で高性能なクラウド環境を提供します。そしてそれらはとてもリーズナブルです。データセンターがアメリカと日本だけでなくアメリカとサンノゼにもあります。なのでグローバルなユースにお使いいただけます。コノハはパーソナルユースからビジネスユースまで幅広いケースをカバーしています。
So now this week they introduced the service called Konoha, which is the public hosting services, and it's going to be provided to all over the world. And they have data centers in Japan and Singapore and US. These services actually can provide it to like a personal use to the business uses. So this is the high performance public cloud services they are proud to announce in this week.
我々の会社は以前からZFS のストレージシステムを使ってきました。それで Nexenta さんのZFS のストレージを使うことで、素晴らしいOpenStack のパブリッククラウドサービスを今週の月曜日にリリースすることができました。
So they have been using the ZFS for many years, and they started using a Nexenta store, and they are very happy to use a Nexenta store with their with OpenStack, and they provide great services for the public cloud, and they are very proud to announce the new service Konoha in this week.
And also June, both Goko-san as the chief architect, Saito-san as the chief evangelist for OpenStack, obviously as a production environment. I don't speak Japanese, but I heard the data centers in the United States, San Jose, in Japan, in Korea, in Singapore, a worldwide deployment, which we're super proud of, obviously as GMO. And the other thing that you told me yesterday, this cloud is called Kumo. Mi means beautiful, Kumo means cloud, so beautiful cloud. And I think it's not only the only great worldwide production environment, but also it's a beautiful cloud. I want to share this with the panel discussion folks as well. It's not only high performant, high capacity, but also beautifully designed. So Mikumo is our keyword for today, and thank you for the support. Thank you for being there for us as customers and partners. And I know you guys are going to have a flight going back to Japan. Thank you for coming to Vancouver to OpenStack Summit. And we would like to have maybe an update in the next upcoming event back in Japan. You're visiting us, now we're going to be visiting you. I'm sure Heidi is going to go through that a little bit also regarding upcoming events. But I want to thank Goko-san for your evangelism and leadership, and Saito-san for you as well, for your evangelism and deployment. And Jun, thank you for coming all the way from Japan to join us to speak. Really appreciate it. As we say in Japanese, arigatou gozaimasu. Arigatou gozaimasu. So Heidi,
and you stole my thunder.
I know, this is your clicker, Heidi, for your next slides, and I think this is a great entry point because we have folks from Asia on the phone, on the system, on the webinar today, as we're going live here, because GMO has such a large deployment out of Japan and globally. Speaking globally, now the microphone is yours. Talk to us about OpenStack and global.
Okay, I'll tell you all about OpenStack. Welcome, first of all, to the OpenStack Summit in Vancouver. And as you probably know, we have summits every 6 months where we bring together all of our community from all over the world. So all of our developers, our enterprise users, and then also this ecosystem of companies that are enabling enterprise users to really deploy and use OpenStack. At this summit, we've got 6,000 people who are attending, and they're coming from 976 countries. 976 organizations in 55 countries. And so this is the largest summit we've ever had. And we're seeing the growth in the summits kind of grow on the same trajectory as OpenStack use is growing and the ecosystem's growing. So we're expecting in Japan, we'll have an even larger summit, we're hoping. And so it will take place at the end of October. And we hope to have, again, people from Japan there, but people represented from all over the world. So we're excited about that. So with our 11th release of the software, which is this Kilo Summit, we're seeing OpenStack's adoption continue to grow and the momentum build. And it's growing in all areas, from academia to government. We had the CIO of Mexico here talking about Mexico's plans to launch 80 services a day on OpenStack. We've got companies like Walmart and Comcast and Ancestry.com here talking about how they're running mission-critical parts of their business on OpenStack. And there's still more to come in the next day or so. And then outside of summits, we're seeing similar type of growth and momentum. We have over 500 companies that are involved in OpenStack. And that's everything from established players that we all know to really innovative startups that are thinking of new ways to make OpenStack easier to use. right, the global community has grown to 27,000 members. And this track deployment number is interesting. It's a little bit of a challenge for us to track how many deployments are out there and how many people are using OpenStack because we don't have licensing. But to the best of our knowledge, just through reports from ecosystem members like Nexenta and others, we've established that there are 750 that we can verify. So that's great progress for us. And then, so we continue to have strong contributions too. If you look at the contributions to Kilo, we had growth over Juno with 1,494 contributors. And with this release, there are a couple of really important things that we initiated. And one is testing across the various OpenStack products, OpenStack public clouds, hosted private clouds, appliances, and distributions. So there's a standardized test that runs across these various products, and so it earns them the OpenStack powered label. So you know exactly how these clouds will operate, and so it's really kind of promising through these tests a consistent set of services, of core services for OpenStack customers. And the other key theme was federation through Keystone. So we've got 31 companies who have committed to enable federation through Keystone by the end of 2015. So that'll make multi-cloud scenarios and hybrid cloud scenarios much easier for OpenStack users. So those are kind of the key themes that we're seeing here. I look forward to seeing you in Japan, and I'll pass it on to Al.
Super. As we're going to Al, Heidi, thank you for all the inspiration. And when I met Heidi and the team about this event, we were super inspired with your passion and energy, and that's very important for an organization like this, a constellation like this with all the vendors coming together. It's super difficult to bring everybody, herding cats we call it in our company, and you guys are doing a great job. So thank you, Heidi, for all your leadership, and with Jonathan and the team, you guys are doing a great event. Every feedback we got from folks, GMO Internet Group from Japan and other customers who came here, yesterday we had a big event, the feedback was this was the best ever.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
So thank you. Arigato gozaimasu to you as well.
And I ordered perfect weather for it. So.
Super. And we'll see you, all these folks, obviously, also GMO back in Japan very shortly. Awesome.
I'll see you.
Al from 451, microphone is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, I'm with 451 Research, and I'm going to start with a Japanese reference of my own here. So I would venture to guess most people have no idea who this gentleman is. And even when I put his name on the screen, I'm sure most people still don't know who he is. But Edward Deming lived to 93. He was the guy that said, if you can take out defects and improve quality, you'll improve products and you will grow revenue. He was over in Japan and did this. They created the Deming Prize because of him, and he came up with the Plan, Do, Check Act, which is something that a lot of IT shops are responsible for now. But here's one of his famous quotes that I'm sure you guys can all recognize. So basically,
there's a spelling mistake, I think, on the second one.
Yeah.
Basically, what it translates to is, in God we trust, all others must bring data. And that's exactly what I'm going to do today. So 451 Research, been around for about 15 years. We're now over 100 analysts. We cover a lot of different areas within the technology space. So one of the things that I'm responsible for at 451 is a lot of our OpenStack related coverage. We publish an annual report that talks a lot about how the platform has evolved, timely topics along the way, how the community and the different business models are growing, and I'm going to share some of those insights today here. So we have 14 different channels that 451 covers, and when we first started covering OpenStack, it was really just focused in two different areas: the service provider channel, which I'm responsible for, and then our development, DevOps, middleware teams, because again, that's where a lot of the focus was. But over the last bit of time, across all of our channels practically, we now have analysts that have written reports or have focused on OpenStack because the community has gotten bigger. There's a lot more to write about, including Nexenta with the storage angle there. So I'm going to go through some cloud adoption trends, talk about momentum, market size, and then leave you with some recommendations for the enterprises that are here. So we do a lot of outreach to enterprises and ask them questions through our Voice of the Enterprise, over 10,000 people strong now in that network. And we ask them, what phase are you evolving your internal infrastructure? So where are you now? And surprisingly, the majority of people are still at virtualization and automation. Getting to orchestration and doing more cloud-related things is where they want to get to, but the majority of people are still stuck with their workloads in earlier technologies. And what was interesting when we asked them, what are your roadblocks for getting there? Most of the issues are non-technical reasons. So we kind of can double click and see that the roadblocks are, people, organization, fear, uncertainty, and doubt are typically the issues. But related to technology, integration, lack of automation, those are things that products and services that are offered by folks who are involved in the OpenStack community are trying to solve. But as much as everybody here wants people to move to the cloud, there are still some things that need to be addressed. So as far as the biggest IT-related pain points, here's a summary of the most significant ones. So those service providers and others who can solve people's security concerns and help them with compliance and regulation and that whole data sovereignty issue that everybody talks about, especially in Europe. Those providers that can solve those issues will find a lot of success. And if you look through this list, OpenStack related products and services can check the box on a lot of these issues. But again, the ones that can articulate this in their value prop will be successful. And as far as the drivers for cloud adoption, so last was why there might have some concerns. These should not be any surprise. So we asked on a scale of 1 to 5, what are your reasons? And again, scaling up IT, cost reductions, quicker time to deliver. Those were the themes over the last 2 days of keynote presentations and breakout sessions here at the OpenStack Summit. It's clearly stuff that the community is trying to address.
Al, not to interrupt you, but when you look at these lists, these are great slides, by the way. Thank you for sharing with us. Seems like many of these things still go back to the total cost of ownership when you think about it, right?
Absolutely.
All these drivers.
Absolutely. We actually did a study, a private cloud pricing index, and we asked a number of providers based on a specific requirements document to provide a quote, how much would it cost to deploy this? And what was interesting was, in the case of OpenStack, a lot of people are doing do-it-yourself deployments and are concerned with a distribution, but you need a lot more people to deploy it in a DIY scenario. So if you had 10 engineers supporting a do-it-yourself cloud, private cloud, and you were able to redeploy 4.5 of them, 45%, if you could reduce your OpEx 45%, you're actually better off with a distro from a total cost of ownership perspective. So some interesting analysis that came out of that study. So now I'm going to move over into the just the momentum. So here's kind of when we talk to enterprises about what kind of different platforms they're looking at. This is the conversation pretty much is amongst this group. Clearly, Amazon and Azure and Google Compute Engine are the hyperscale providers that everybody's looking at. But you also have VMware. A lot of people have private cloud and just virtualized environments that are heavily VMware. But when they start to think about open source, they're increasingly looking at OpenStack and CloudStack. Eucalyptus, it's not your eyes. It's kind of like blurry on purpose because slowly they're kind of fading into the HP fabric and not so much a product in and of itself that is on top of mind for enterprises at this point. This is kind of a nostalgic slide, but when we asked people in 2012 what some of the interesting technologies they're looking at, OpenStack didn't even show up. In 2013, it's now mentioned amongst companies that spend a lot of money on advertising and have actual products. OpenStack's not a product, but it has a lot of mind share, and that's actually increasing. And then we did a custom project for a large enterprise and asked 365 global service providers which management tools they're using. VMware clearly it was in the majority, but 20% of them are now deploying products and services using OpenStack. So that was a very interesting finding from that particular study, that it is, again, gaining some momentum. And when we asked them like which modules they're using, obviously Nova Compute, but amongst the other pieces, service providers, storage, networking, orchestration, like they're looking at the stuff that is now considered part of the core of OpenStack. So there's a lot of interest there.
On Nexenta behalf, I love that slide.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course you do. So Heidi touched on a little bit of this, but we've been tracking the momentum and community growth. Clearly, you could see that there is plenty of adoption and interest in continuing every year. Every 6 months, the summit gets bigger. The number of supporting organizations gets larger. There's a lot of new people at it all the time, as Heidi kind of highlighted as well. So I double-clicked on the one. So this is the community membership growth by release, and you could see when the foundation was established. But what's interesting about this slide is you see a lot more companies that your kids would recognize as from their logo. Once Grizzly happened and some of the releases were more stable, you could see a lot more enterprise interest. In Havana, there was a big push into Asia, so you see companies like C-Trip in there. But even the U.S. government is now, with the USDA and NSA, there's a lot of diversity in the different types of companies that are involved with OpenStack at this point. When we talk to enterprises, it's still listed as the use cases that they're looking at are still private infrastructure as a service is where they're at. They're building virtual labs, small enterprise business apps, but there's clearly examples of large businesses as well. And NFV is increasingly of interest, an interesting use case. These are stats from the OpenStack Foundation from their surveys, and I think these numbers have gotten larger, but still POCs outnumber production 2 to 1 at this point, but still there's momentum there in production. These are just a couple examples of what people are telling us about OpenStack. They love the portability. They want to be able to touch the code and see the code and make changes if they want to. In some cases, their CIOs are saying, we need OpenStack, and now their teams have to go and deliver, so there's a lot of mind share. Increasingly, they're looking at applications even like Oracle. Mirantis recently announced that they're doing some work with Oracle to bring those workloads. So increasing mission-critical apps are of interest to enterprises. Some still have concerns that it's not ready. But they're looking to displace VMware and things like that. So it was a good cross-section of feedback we got to show. But enterprises, we talked about this flexibility, modularity, open source, like those are the reasons why they like it. But some of the reasons why they're having some issues is that it's still, compared to VMware, the reliability, resiliency, again, it's a mindset, and the Foundation and the member companies have started to show why some of those concerns have been mitigated. It's very complex. That's why you need people to help you, and there's limited supply of developers, and they're expensive. So I always tell people, become an OpenStack developer, and you could probably do pretty well for yourself.
But you would argue also, Al, when VMware came to this space, and they've done a great job over the past 15 years, but late 90s, early 2000s, the same concerns were also with VMware.
Absolutely.
All the large system vendors said, hey, this is not going to work, and virtualization is not real. I'm doing LPARs on my mainframes. Yeah. Look where we are 15 years later. So things start like this, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the other things we do within the OpenStack community is track the size of the market. So we look at everybody who is providing a service that's specifically around OpenStack. What we don't include are like storage and network equipment, because that equipment could be deployed in any environment. So we really just focus on that. And we kind of break it into a number of different buckets, products and distros, service providers, cloud management. Nexenta is not here because of the nature of what they're doing, but it's as we evolve this model, it's something that they would be included. So those are the different models. So here's the market size. You know, we've been tracking this. So it eclipsed $1 billion market in 2015. We expect it to exceed $3 billion by 2018. Service providers clearly is the largest component of that, but the distro products and management services is the fastest growing. So off of a small base, you could see that that has a lot of momentum there. Platform as a service, DevOps tools, cloud management are smaller and growing fast, but the distro area is big because enterprises are now maybe have started with OpenStack and decided that they need help, so they bring in a distro provider. Venture funding around OpenStack is growing. There was some big numbers in there funding-wise. That 2014 number was a little bit of a hockey stick, in part due to some funding that the Mirantis folks received. And then there's a lot of M&A activity over the last year. Red Hat bought a couple companies. Cisco bought a company. Some of the initial founders of OpenStack who've been around have been acquired by larger entities. So just to kind of wrap up and summarize some recommendations for the enterprise. So as the earlier slide said about a lot of the issues are non-technical, getting buy-in from the impacted organizations. If you're an IT guy, say we need OpenStack, but your operations folks are not bought in, you could run into some challenges. Don't underestimate what it takes from a management perspective, people-wise, to manage this, so you got to build that into any kind of business justification. Leverage the community, seek out vendors that are involved, and don't underestimate the time to implement. A lot of people thought they were going to put something up in 3 months, and it took them 9 months, a year. You don't need to consume OpenStack all at once. You can take the pieces that you want and look at suppliers you already have or are considering, and they might be involved with OpenStack, and will help you make your journey a little more successful. So, thank you.
Super. Thank you so much, Al. This was great. Before we move to Francesco and Solinea for a second to wrap it up, because I'm sure some of the folks are joining us as well as we're doing this live webinar globally from Asia and also from Europe. A couple of things that you talked about, I think it's resonating with all of us. As Nexenta, we just finalized our funding as well, and big portion was that the OpenStack growth tying to that, to our valuation as a company, and many other folks around the table. I know Francesco went through this over the last couple of quarters as well, and beyond. One thing I would like to add, OpenStack has been also, from a customer perspective, like we were talking to GMO, Internet Group from Japan earlier, has been a unifier of many of the different initiatives and assets. We see a lot of customers, especially on the Nexenta front, with Zen and CloudStack in the past, when they were the only option in the marketplace in the last decade. And then you had obviously a lot of VMware deployments, Citrix deployments around Zen after the ZenSource acquisition, a lot of Microsoft deployments around Hyper-V, and also with Amazon and S3-enabled services, customers were kind of confused which way to go. And I thought, and we felt that they were silos. We were trying to tout their own horn and their own deployment. Over the past, I would say 8 quarters, maybe we can have a conversation at the end, we're seeing OpenStack initiatives as a unifier of all of those initiatives, and OpenStack Foundation also did a great job to bring all these vendors in, like the slide you used earlier, maybe that was slide number 19. You had all those logos up there from VMware to Microsoft Azure and so on. And I think now customers using OpenStack as a catalyst to look at their assets, to renew their initiatives and integrate them with more knowledge to cut cost. That slide was amazing that you showed main drivers. When you read the lines, everything goes back to cost. Yep. In a shape or form. So having said the cost, having talked about integration and where the summit is all about, Francesco, what are you guys doing in Solinea? I know a lot of people know you. A lot of people know the company. A quick update would be fantastic from you. I know you have only one slide, but it's pretty direct. Yeah.
Thank you, Tarkan. And as Al said, we actually work with companies that are in the process of adopting and embracing OpenStack, and that's what we do. We help accelerate the adoption of OpenStack and in general open infrastructure, of which Nexenta obviously is a core component of what our clients do. So when we talk about OpenStack adoption, we also talk about open infrastructure adoption. Open infrastructure goes everywhere, everything from cloud strategy development to design and architecture, architecting solutions for specific use cases that customers want, and also to help them scale to what their needs are in the long term. We also look at organizations that are starting to trying to increase agility in the enterprise and really driving the adoption of DevOps and automation to support the deployment of OpenStack and to truly take advantage of what the platform can and the ecosystem can bring to the table. We've actually been working in the OpenStack ecosystem since its inception. We've been around for 2 years, but prior to that, a lot of the team members at Solinea have been working with OpenStack since the Austin release. We were responsible, or some of our team were responsible for deploying the first Swift deployment in Asia back in 2011. And so we've seen the great growth of OpenStack and the great growth of the community. And it's no surprise that we have over 6,000 attendees here. It just goes to show you that the adoption curve of OpenStack in the enterprise and globally is actually accelerating. So we see a lot of the challenges that Al mentioned in terms of what enterprises are looking to do with cloud and OpenStack in particular. We work with enterprises globally. We've got customers in Europe, APAC, as well as the US, and all of them have very similar challenges, and we're helping them to solve these challenges in a very similar pattern. So in terms of accelerating the growth and adopting the growth, we look at not only the technology infrastructure itself, but we look at how the business can benefit from deploying solutions like OpenStack and how to really automate and accelerate the agility within the enterprise, as well as driving the cost reduction that is one of the ultimate goals that people actually want to try to achieve. So what we also do is in terms of helping organizations deploy OpenStack, we also see a lot of demand for hybrid solutions, hybrid clouds. And now that the OpenStack technology is much more mature, there's platforms that allow you to bridge the gap between private and public much more efficiently than you could 2 years ago. We see organizations deploying hybrid solutions with AWS or Google or Azure on the public side and OpenStack on the private side. We actually work with Mirantis, we work with HP, we work with Red Hat. All those organizations, as Al mentioned, leveraging the distro, which is actually what enterprises should be doing instead of doing it themselves, because otherwise they're going to get into a quagmire. And what we do is help them to optimize the deployment, optimize the architecture, and optimize the delivery of the services and allow the business to achieve its objectives. We also, one of the things that we could look at as well is the case study that is in the OpenStack Foundation, the car cloud case study that we worked with in the past. That is a great example of how organizations start from the beginning in terms of developing a strategy, defining an architecture that supports their current and future needs, deploying the application, to Al's point, of incremental deployment of OpenStack with proof of concepts and pilots, testing and iterating, and then deploying a production environment over the course of 12 to 18 months. It's not easy. Enterprises need to be led by the hand, but there's tremendous support in the community, not only from organizations like Nexenta, Mirantis, HP, and our own, but also the fact that you could leverage the open source community of OpenStack and truly take advantage of the innovation that comes into the platform. And ultimately, we're continuing to see growth. I mean, we saw this in Paris in November. We're seeing it here today. I'm sure we're going to see a tremendous increase in participants in Japan. And that's just to show you that OpenStack is a global phenomenon. It's not stopping. The maturity of the platform is there now. It is ready for the enterprise. It is ready for production workloads. And we actually look forward to helping organizations take the journey into the OpenStack ecosystem and beyond. Thank you.
So as we're going to Wipro, before we go to Wipro, I always call Francesco as the mini Wipro before I come to you, because they're bringing all these pieces together, working with partners like Mirantis, Canonical, HP, Nexenta, you mentioned, and obviously OpenStack itself. I know you're a nice guy. You don't mention a lot of company names, but I'm going to go a little bit further than what you said, because you've done some amazing job and you're being humble, Francesco. The car cloud with Hyundai, hopefully we're going to bring that to Heidi and OpenStack in Japan. They're doing amazing work. All those cars now are becoming basically internet-connected devices, going to a big data analytics platform in the back end using OpenStack. A lot of work we're doing obviously in Japan and Korea. Korean Telecom, one of the largest deployments with the software-defined data center on commodity hardware, now getting into OpenStack. They start with Cloud Stack with your team. with Jamie and Fox. They have, I believe, Michael in the back, we have a live audience here, a mini audience. They've done almost 150 petabytes in production at Korean Telecom. Full disclosure, they are one of our investors in this last round, thanks to Mirantis' big fundraising that bring all the C-levels up for OpenStack. And tying to that, all the other work going on with SoftBank, with KDDI, with a lot of other companies in Japan. So we look forward to having that big event with Heidi, with you, with OpenStack. Absolutely, it's going to be amazing. So I think some of the customers you had in Asia, they started this. Asian companies are usually have a lot of guts. They move fast, and they make it happen. They not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. So look forward to some of these white papers with many companies that we're going to put on the stage, hopefully in Japan.
Yes, we'll look forward in October.
Awesome. So Ram, you're the big version, large version, India version, now global version of Solinea, but in bigger terms. You guys are a large company. It'll give a little bit background on Wipro.
Thank you, Tarkan, and thank you, Mini Wipro. Who we are, very quickly, we are a global IT services and system integration organization. We are 8 billion in revenues, 150,000 people spread across 6 continents. What do we do on open source today? We offer enterprise class open source solutions, specifically around OpenStack cloud applications, virtualization, and software-defined everything. And how do we do that? That's the most important differentiator Wipro brings onto the table. We are not alone here. We bring in a big OEM ecosystem like the Nexentas of the world, and then bring to the table a wide experience in implementing open source solutions. So coming to OpenStack, what have we done with OpenStack and what is our positioning with OpenStack? I was telling, hey, we have been early adapters of OpenStack. You know, we started our OpenStack journey in 2010. Today, in addition to being a biggest OpenStack integrator, we have close to 100 plus people working on OpenStack components and contributing to the OpenStack community. We have complete expertise on all the 9 core components of OpenStack today. We have developed customized solutions on Nova, Cinder, and on all the networking and the storage technologies of OpenStack. Coming specifically to a few areas where we see the market moving, and this is something which is very important and very interesting for both the OpenStack and other open source technologies. Today, what we are seeing in the market is there is a huge transformation on the data center services, and that's a big part of our business today. And what we have done, hybrid cloud is a reality for sure, right? And what we have done as part of this is we have created a framework, the Open Data Center framework, which helps customer realize their hybrid cloud. And helps accelerate the hybrid cloud journey for the customers.
And by the way, Ram, we've been hearing yesterday also, we had this big event, a lot of customers, we had some of the tech leadership from some of the largest universities like ASU with us, and they were talking about that from a big service company perspective, big sure. SI perspective. Wipro was, and still is, the leader in this open data center, open SDX space. Many companies are still learning this, but you guys actually were gutsy, just got into this way back, and you have actually a practice, right? Your practice leader is in town.
Absolutely, and I think we embraced this pretty early in the early stages, and there is a drive right from the top management on open source, right? That's one of the reasons, and we have seen production implementations with our customers today. And we leverage OpenStack extensively in our open data center solutions, and I'd quickly touch upon what are the type of services we offer around the OpenStack. We have been in the business for the last 5 years now. I won't go through all the list, but specifically if you look at it on the hybrid cloud journey, we have a single window pane for moving the workloads between private and public cloud. You have a private OpenStack implementation and an AWS or an Azure implementation. We have a single window for management and provisioning across a private and a public cloud. So that's something which we have done. We have done tiered storage architecture based on the SLAs, a tier 1 for an ERP SLAs and a tier 2 for a backup and archival. We have implemented that, so that's the second part we have done. Today we have optimized OpenStack for an all-flash storage, so we have done that. We have a working implementation at the customer sites. We have done that. The other one on the SIFT, there is an existing API interface, but we have also created a mediation layer to talk with third-party object storage. So pretty much we are very, very active on OpenStack, and we have created mediation integration layers around OpenStack, right? That's something which we have done. We have integrated with multi-hypervisor today, and we have integrated with the Docker as well on a DevOps environment today. So that's something. And where does Nexenta play for us? Nexenta is a key part of our overall offerings today. Nexenta is a key part of our technology stack. What we have done is we have done the providers for the Cinder and Glance APIs and the Swift APIs over Nexenta. We have also tested and validated NFS fiber channel on OpenStack for Nexenta today. What we see in the marketplace today, definitely hybrid cloud is a reality, and Nexenta is a key part of our technology stack to realize an hybrid cloud solution for customers, whether it's a large-scale data center transformation or a medium-scale data center transformation. And OpenStack is going to be an integral part of our story.
Fantastic. And Ram, you're based in Northern California.
Yep.
You spent a long time in Paris.
Absolutely.
And you keep telling me I want to ask TK, the CEO of Wipro, to push, send me back to Europe to deploy OpenStack everywhere in Europe.
In Paris.
Specifically in Paris. You like the great wine and great food there. But joking all aside, I was actually before we moved to my friend Kiko, we were actually in your kickoff, in your sales conference in Orlando. I have not seen such a thing in my life. I've been to a lot of sales conferences. You had almost 1,500 people from a global field organization of Wipro, and you understand the drive, the inspiration, the passion from you guys. And I'm not just saying this to be nice to you, because sometimes I'm not nice to you, even though we partner great together. And joking all aside, you guys done such an amazing job. And TK, your CEO, gets up there on the stage and talks about open source driven and commodity hardware driven end-to-end services from the data center to end user, from infrastructure to apps with Wipro, and setting the stage for other SIs to follow suit. So a lot of the other folks from India and elsewhere now following your footsteps, and we're super proud to working with you, Solinea, and I know all the vendors on this panel and at the event are partnering with you in some shape or form. So your kickoff conference and all the focus on OpenStack and open source driven, open data center driven go-to-market was amazing. We were blown away. And all the customers that Heidi talked about, like Walmart, like CenturyLink, some of the big deals that you guys are working on, Cardinal Health, was amazing to see that in action with your field organization. So thank you for being here. I know you guys have a large organization now here, right, in Vancouver?
Yeah.
How many people do you guys have here now? Just
Canada,
showed up?
I think close to 1,000 plus we have in
It's
Canada.
amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. Sometimes folks don't know the brand as well, probably, but in the tech circles, Wipro is now clearly leading the stack, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No pun intended.
Yeah. And thank you very much, Tarkan, for giving us this opportunity.
Ram, thank you for all the hard work you guys do for the customers, because at the end of the day, it's all about SLAs and service, and you guys make it a reality like Solinea does. So thank you. As we move forward fast, a key partner of ours, Canonical, Kiko is with us today on stage. I'm not going to call you with your English name. I'm going to go with the Brazilian form.
Yes, don't use my Christian name.
So Kiko, the microphone is yours.
Thanks very much. So Canonical's long history of involvement in driving change in open source. I did a master's degree about 18 years ago that was looking at the beginning of open source. What were people doing in terms of projects and so on. And it's just very interesting to see how this has evolved from early Linux to OpenStack. When we started Canonical, our first release was in October 2014, we started with this motto, Linux for human beings. And the driving idea behind it was that Linux and open source in general was generally consumed by technologists, and it was very complicated technology, and that we were going to make it something which was easy to assimilate and to use. What's happened since then is that not only has open source grown and become more complex, but IT in general today is very complex. If you look at the OpenStack organizational chart and then you look at the components, you look at this and say, how exactly does this work? And I think Ubuntu's been instrumental in providing that simple messaging and that simple delivery of a solution that just works. And I think because of that, we've really, in the last 6 years, been seen in the service space as something which has accelerated all the software-defined disruption that's happening. The transition to public cloud, if you look at Amazon, we are more than half of Amazon instances out there. People that were built on Amazon or any startup built in the last 5 years used Ubuntu at its core. Look at Waze, BuzzFeed, Snapchat, Dropbox. Anybody that was built in the last 5 years was built on Ubuntu. because we provided, first, of course, disruptive economics. In 2004, the standard for Linux was that Linux was free software, but delivered in a proprietary format. You had to pay to get Linux. That was the standard that was set. And we came in and say, actually, no, Linux is a driver for change. We have to make it available freely. People have to be able to get access to it in a quality form and fully supported with security updates and maintenance. So I think Canonical has really been instrumental in driving this change here. This last 2 years, we've been asked by so many customers about storage. They're saying, we've changed everything the way we deployed it. We used to be all Windows or VMware shops. Now we look at Linux and Ubuntu at the heart of this. But we're still tied to big appliances, very expensive, $3,000 SSD purchases. Who can see this in the market, And so we've seen now this drive to people saying, is there a better solution? Is there an answer to this? And of course, we're not the only ones that are looking at this. People, even in the open source community, have picked up on it and said, actually, the idea that commodity hardware is now cheaply available and fast enough to drive storage that was in the past only doable with InfiniBand, fiber channel, expensive, complicated technology is now available by basically from any OEM in the world can deliver you something there. So we see scale-out storage as the next wave of change. It's not a joke that you're looking at every week. You can look and you see there's this different piece of scale-out technology out there. The reason is because it's a hot area, and I think Nexenta has brought an incredible team together, leveraging past experience in file systems and storage technology, and I think Nexenta Edge will be a winner.
Yeah, you refer to Nexenta Edge. We just announced with you this week, which is our new scale-out cloud copy on write. Object storage with block services in the marketplace. Obviously, we're getting a lot of interest in that. There are other solutions in the marketplace in OpenStack fashion. We're open with a lot of different opportunities and solutions. But we believe key areas were obviously scalability, high performance, and super, super low cost. And I think working with you and other partners and OpenStack on this panel, it's very exciting for us. So thank you for your partnership.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you for your passion. Again, I keep saying the same thing, and people probably taking this as a wishy-washy language. But really, at this event, the inspiration from the customers and the passion of the customers are unbelievable. We just gave a party yesterday. Like I know Mirantis is also doing one, and I know Canonical is doing one. People show up just like very OpenStack fashion. I think we're going back to 60s again. That's Haight Ashbury kind of feel going on. Just customers are showing up and saying, look, I want to get into this. Where can I start? And because they see the cost savings, to Al's point earlier, to Heidi's presentation as well, the reason the size is growing so fast is because it's easy to get into and start deploying. There are complexities, and there are some concerns like Al talked about. But those are the same type of concerns people had about mainframes back in 50s and 60s. And now the same thing is happening in this big wave. So what you guys are doing at Canonical and Ubuntu with the product portfolio is amazing. You have a great CEO, obviously, and you guys have a lot of passion. So thank you for being part of this. Thank you, Kiko. I should say obrigado.
Janelle, Tarkan.
So on that note, dear friend, dear partner, Boris Rensky, co-founder of Mirantis. Boris, you guys doing great stuff. For those folks who are connected to with audio, he has a great Canucks jersey on him. Obviously, in the Russian NHL, big power hockey feel and love. Speaking of that, Boris, you guys just finished your funding. You guys are pushing very hard in the OpenStack space and beyond. Why don't you talk about the state of the company, where you guys are, and also you're a board member, right, on OpenStack Foundation, correct?
That is correct.
Fantastic. Talk to us about, from your angle, what you're seeing.
Yes, of course. So a few words about Mirantis. As a matter of introduction, I think that most of the guys attending the summit probably have heard of us, but I understand a lot of people are connecting from overseas. So we today are probably the largest independent pure-play OpenStack vendor, providing OpenStack distribution and services around it. And what makes us unique in the ecosystem is our exclusive focus on OpenStack. And Tarkan, you mentioned that what we're doing in a company as far as OpenStack and beyond is concerned. And the thing is that we don't do anything beyond OpenStack. This is our kind of internal culture, and we live and die by OpenStack. The one very important thing about us that I wanted to highlight is that inside the company we have this culture that we see ourselves not just as a vendor providing an OpenStack service or a distribution to the customer. We kind of see ourselves as a partner, as a gateway between the customer and the open source community. And in that spirit, we very much believe in this notion of kind of being the source of the source code. So we very actively contribute upstream. We've consistently been inside the top 3 contributors. We're actually the #1 bug fixer in the most recent OpenStack Kilo release. And no matter how much you slice and dice it, we're actually inside the top 3. And finally, the third thing that's probably worth highlighting is I mentioned the singular focus on OpenStack. It's cool, but it actually has really pragmatic benefits for our customers, because we see OpenStack as, and as actually Mark Colliers mentioned on stage just yesterday, we see it truly as an integration engine. And us, as somebody who brings this integration engine to our customers in the form factor of a distribution, it is important that we are able and free to invest in those integration points that are best of breed and most important for the customers today. So as a good example, we invest quite a bit in integrating with Nexenta. But we work with a number of other storage providers as well. But this notion of us being only OpenStack focused and doing nothing under the stack or above the stack gives us the freedom to actually focus on integrating with best of breed components and bringing the customers the kind of the stack that they want. Now, switching gears a little bit and taking off my Mirantis CMO hat, putting the hat of the OpenStack board member. I wanted to highlight a couple of things that I think are very important that are happening during the summit. So I think that the summit, as I see it, is a turning point for OpenStack, where OpenStack is evolving from being this cool and interesting technology, primarily kind of embraced and kind of focused on by the sysadmins and operators, to the one that is much more focused on actually workloads and developers. And this is a very important turning point in kind of the evolution of any open source platform. I think that we have seen a similar pattern with Linux. And the things that have propelled, really kind of pulled Linux into mainstream was the popularity of a LAMP stack for web workloads. As well as Oracle's embrace, actually, our big vendors' embrace of Linux. And today, we're seeing a very similar pattern happening with OpenStack, only the equivalent of the LAMP stack in this kind of a distributed software-defined data center world are all of the cool and empowering technologies such as all of the big data fabrics like Hadoop or Cassandra, or all of the cluster management software like Kubernetes or Mesos, etc. And the foundation, in conjunction with a number of foundation members, and we contributed quite a bit during the summit, has launched something called a community app catalog. And what it is something where people can now actually go and seamlessly pool things like various distributions of Hadoop, Kubernetes, Mesos, Cloud Foundry, etc., in a very seamless and kind of out-of-the-box fashion, pull those technologies onto an OpenStack environment, deploy them, and start using them immediately. And I think that that's a very powerful notion that actually is going to be the next wave of OpenStack evolution. So the first wave, we've heard a bunch of infrastructure vendors making announcements that we've built an OpenStack driver, we've joined OpenStack Foundation, etc. I think the next wave is exactly the same thing, only at the application level. So with that,
that's great.
I'm ready to close.
That's fantastic. And I know your pure play positioning is a big game changer, as you talked about. And I know you wearing 2 hats, which is also great to see, both angles, Boris, both from a Mirantis perspective and OpenStack perspective. Very exciting. Obviously, the things that you guys are working on, we're doing a lot of work with you. I know you're collaborating with Wipro, with Solinea, with Canonical, and other vendors. Speaking of that, just to wrap it up and open it up for Q&A in a few seconds. From an Nexenta perspective, obviously we see a huge opportunity with OpenStack, and as OpenStack is growing, and as a unifier of other islands and silos, bringing in VMware workloads, Citrix workloads, Microsoft workloads, S3-enabled public cloud service workloads, and other workloads basically from legacy systems, from compute, network, and storage perspective, as Al talked about, and bringing all these pieces together with the right level of service with Wipro, Solinea, companies like Canonical, and again, with Mirantis, it's a great story. There are complexities around that, but what we see from a Nexenta perspective, obviously, I'm going to tap my own horn right now with my Nexenta hat on, is storage is one of the biggest inhibitors and cost inhibitors, obviously, which is the core of your discussion, Al, earlier from 451. What we saw is almost 70% of all total cost of ownership for a CIO goes back to the storage-related activity in the data center. The entire data volume, we were talking about this to GMO Internet Group yesterday, is going from 6 zettabytes with a Z, Zebra, to almost 40 zettabytes, 42 zettabytes, according to 451 and other research organizations, without Internet of Things. With all the things that Wipro and Solinea working with companies like Hyundai, Honda, CenturyLink, Cardinal Health, all big data analytics, the big deployment we had at University of Toronto for oncology research, the data is growing crazy and storage is still living in the 1960s and 70s. We jokingly say there is a very hardware-centric closed system environment which costs minimum $1,000 per terabyte. You can go get a Western Digital 1 terabyte drive today from an Apple store for less than $30. So going back to the cost, there is a lot of premium on the storage front. That's why we believe in the open source world. We actually, in a cute way, our hashtag on Twitter is OpenSDS, open source driven, OpenStack focused, software-defined storage for software-defined everything from infrastructure to apps, from the data center to end user. That's why we love Wipro's story, Solinea's story, talking about from a service integration perspective on commodity hardware and believing end-to-end software, like GMO did. GMO worked with OpenStack. They work with, obviously, Canonical, with Mirantis. They've done a lot of work with companies like Dell, Supermicro. And obviously, their storage environment they put on this OpenSDS, open source-driven software-defined storage end-to-end for very low costs, block, file, and now object services, as Kiko mentioned from Canonical earlier. In our story, from an Nexenta perspective, we have a story we call any story, any disk, from Seagate to Western Digital, Toshiba, to any flash, to SanDisk InfiniFlash, to Micron, to any compute environment. Again, from a Dell perspective, Supermicro perspective, Quanta perspective, and even companies now we're partnering in China, white box manufacturers that some of us not heard and partner with, from Inspur to SuperCloud. If they look at our press release on our Nexenta Edge announcement with Mirantis and Canonical and Solinea and Wipro and OpenStack, and also 451 was mentioned, you will see a lot of vendors, multi-billion-dollar server vendors from China, from Vietnam now coming into space, delivering x86 commodity server where networking, storage, and all the application infrastructures move into. So server becomes the core again, but now on a commodity framework, bringing the cost to a level we've never seen before. And tying that to all these cloud platforms, obviously, and OpenStack is the reason we're here, and to any workload. So our story is a complete software-defined vision on commodity hardware, working with all the partners here on the panel at this event. And we're looking forward to a great event. I really mean this from the bottom of my heart. I think the Japan event with OpenStack, with Heidi, with you and the organization is going to be a great one. I know Mirantis is planning a lot of work for that. I know Canonical, Wipro is going to be there in a big way. Wipro just pushed heavily into Japan. This is a big deal now into Asia. And I know, Solinea, you've done a lot of work in Japan also with Japanese and Korean customers in that region. And I know 451 is going to be as well. You say 451 or 451? I'm just saying either one. So on that note, I know we have some questions. I'm going to ask our field CTO, Michael Lechen, in the back end. Maybe take a few questions before we finish it up here. I know the time is tight.
So we got one on here that said, so OpenStack deployments tend to be rather complex, is what everyone thinks. So is adding in the software-defined space? Does that make it more complex? And what would you say to simplify the deployments?
So, Heidi, do you want to take that? Boris, let's go to Boris very quick. So to wrap it up, you're asking, it's complex, right? And now you're talking about software defined. Is it adding another layer of complexity?
Another layer of
Got it. Boris, what's your take?
On top of it?
Yeah, no, I don't think it adds another layer of complexity because I mean, OpenStack is ultimately all about tying together a bunch of software components. It is an integration engine, and the storage part of it is probably the least complicated and easiest from the standpoint of integration point cleanliness. So you know, we've been working with Nexenta. We're one of our first partners. Probably they were the first guys in the storage space for whom we've spent the effort to build an OpenStack driver. And one of our first joint webcasts with a storage vendor was with Nexenta, displaying how seamless and easy it can be to actually, you know, run an OpenStack environment and use Nexenta storage solutions as full block storage under OpenStack. So the answer is no.
Yeah. No, that's great.
So
and on that note, I have to leave.
No, absolutely. I know you have another panel. Go ahead, Boris. I know you have another panel. Boris, you're busy running around with 2 hats. Actually, you have multiple hats. All right, take care, Boris. Go take maybe a couple more very last questions, Michael.
So what kind of workloads would you guys suggest that people start OpenStack with?
Maybe Al, very quick. You had a slide on that, but I think it's important.
Sure. So what we're seeing is that a lot of people are starting out using OpenStack to build a test and dev environment. That's clearly the number one. They're starting to now use it for cloud native applications, and I'm sure the other folks on the panel have real world examples that they're seeing that probably are related. Say big data is another
I would you reference it. We're getting a lot of big data.
That's absolutely right. Yes, exactly. So dev test primarily cloud native applications, but big data is actually a large component of what we see. For example, our co-customer in Korea. That was the main driver of why they invested in deploying OpenStack with Nexenta on the storage side.
One last question, Michael, maybe we can take?
So I think we'll wrap it up with a storage question.
Okay.
So with why is OpenStack storage getting so much attention, and what's the shift that storage is important to OpenStack?
Maybe, Kiko, do you want to take?
Sure. I think it's because storage didn't get reinvented in the last 10 years. Almost everything else did, whereas storage remained relatively untouched. And now it's come to time, I said it before, you know, part of it is linked to the fact that you can now get commodity hardware cheaply from multiple vendors. That's part of the ingredient that needs to make it happen. But the reality is, you know, lots of industries go through this wave where there's some static technology that gets adopted, and the margins on that keep going up and up and up because there's no alternative. Well, at some point there's a transition point, and that transition is happening now to storage. This is why there are lots of people that are looking at this space. This is why customers are now interested not only in just experimenting with it, but in saying, actually, I'm going to move the stuff from this SAN over to a scale-out infrastructure because it's going to be much more cost-effective. It will meet my performance goals, and in the end, my users will get more value out of it.
I was with a customer, just let's final word on this to tie to what Kiko said and addressing the question. It's a large retailer. We were talking to, and actually, the retailer you just talked about earlier, Heidi, Walmart folks we were talking to, and someone said in the room that compute went through the revolution over the past decade or so with virtualization and everything else. Obviously, companies like VMware prove that, and others. And networking is going through that revolution, again, with Cisco, Arista, and all the other work going on with Cumulus, Big Switch, and Big Move, and democratizing the network infrastructure, but storage still didn't happen. So someone said in the room, the next decade with OpenStack focus is the revolution. The Arab Spring is coming now, the storage spring. Democratization going to happen in storage. And that's why we're seeing a lot of opportunity because customers want to cut that cost. So on that note, we want to thank to our live audience here and all the folks on the phone. Thank you for making it happen. And obviously, very importantly, Heidi at OpenStack, obviously, Al at 451, Francesco at Solinea, Ram at Wipro, all the way from Bangalore and Northern California and Paris originally. And obviously, Kiko, thank you so much for joining us from Canonical, and Boris from Mirantis. Thank you for this lively panel. A lot of passion, a lot of energy. We'll see you again in Japan very soon. And thank you, GMO. Bye-bye.
Thank you.